The sound of my Generac generator humming to life at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning was met with the kind of shrieking you'd expect from someone witnessing a murder, not routine equipment maintenance. I was standing in my backyard in Scottsdale, Arizona, with my phone in one hand and the manufacturer's manual in the other, doing exactly what I was supposed to do according to the warranty requirements. Turn that thing off right now. The voice belonged to Patricia Henderson, the HOA president of Desert Bloom Estates, a woman whose entire personality could be summed up as weaponized entitlement wrapped in a cardigan from Chico's. I looked up from the manual to see her stomping across my lawn, her face the color of a sunburned tourist who'd forgotten their SPF 50. Her perfectly highlighted blonde hair didn't move an inch despite the Arizona wind, shellacked into submission with what had to be an entire can of hairspray. "Good morning, Patricia," I said, keeping my voice level. "Just doing my monthly generator test. Takes about 15 minutes. I don't care what you're doing, Harold. This is disturbing the peace, and I'm calling the police if you don't shut it down immediately." She had her phone out already, waving it at me like a weapon. It's 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, and the HOA bylaws say no loud noises before 7 a.m. or after 9 p.m. I checked. I held up my own phone where I'd pulled up the community rules. This is well within acceptable hours. Her eyes narrowed to slits. Those rules were written for reasonable disturbances, not industrial equipment. It's a home standby generator, Patricia. Lots of people in Arizona have them. Power outages aren't exactly rare around here. I gestured to the unit, which sat on a concrete pad beside my house, professionally installed and permitted through the city. And according to Generac, I have to test it monthly to maintain the warranty. It's right here in the manual. She wasn't listening. Her fingers were already dancing across her phone screen, and I heard the telltale sound of a call connecting. My stomach dropped as I realized she was actually doing it. She was calling the cops on me for testing my generator. "Yes, hello. I need to report a noise disturbance at 4521 Saguaro Vista Drive." She locked eyes with me as she spoke, her expression triumphant. "My neighbor is running some kind of industrial machinery that's creating an unbearable racket." I pulled out my own phone and started recording. If this was going to get stupid, and it clearly was, I wanted documentation. Patricia continued her performance for the dispatcher. "It's been going on for several minutes now, and he refuses to turn it off. I'm the HOA president, and this is absolutely against our community standards." She paused, listening. "Yes, I'll stay on the line." The generator continued its steady hum behind me, exactly as loud as a riding lawnmower, which half the neighborhood used regularly without Patricia losing her mind. This wasn't about noise. This was about control. Patricia had been HOA president for 3 years, and in that time, she'd made it her personal mission to fine, harass, and intimidate anyone who didn't follow her increasingly arbitrary interpretations of the rules. "The police are on their way," she announced, ending the call with a dramatic flourish. "And I'll be filing an official complaint with the HOA board. This will cost you, Harold." "My name is Harold Ingram, and I own this property," I said clearly, still recording. It's currently 10:07 a.m. on Tuesday, April 15th, 2025. I'm conducting required monthly maintenance on my legally permitted and installed Generac generator, as specified in the manufacturer's warranty documentation. The HOA president, Patricia Henderson, has called the police despite this being well within allowable hours for outdoor equipment use according to our community bylaws, Section 4, Paragraph 3. Patricia's face somehow got redder. "You can't record me without my permission." "Arizona is a one-party consent state for recording," I replied. I only need my own permission." She opened her mouth to respond, but the arrival of a Scottsdale police cruiser cut her off. That was fast. Too fast. They must have had a unit nearby. A young officer stepped out, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I didn't blame him. This was clearly not what he'd signed up for when he took the oath to protect and serve. "Good morning, officer. I'm Harold Ingram. I own this property." I kept my hands visible and my tone respectful. "I'm conducting routine maintenance on my home generator. This is the manual from Generac that requires monthly testing." I held up the manual, open to the relevant page. The officer, whose nameplate read Morrison, glanced at the generator, then at Patricia, then at me. The resignation in his eyes suggested this wasn't his first HOA rodeo. "Madam, you called about industrial machinery," Officer Morrison asked Patricia. "Yes, that generator is completely unreasonable. It's disturbing everyone in the neighborhood." She gestured broadly, though I noticed none of our other neighbors had come out to complain. In fact, I'd seen old Mrs. Chen next door working in her garden not 10 minutes ago, completely unbothered by the noise. Officer Morrison walked closer to the generator, cocking his head to listen. "Sir, how long have you been running this?" "About 12 minutes now. The test cycle is 15 minutes total, so I should be done in about 3 more minutes." "And you do this monthly?" "Yes, sir. First Tuesday of every month, 10 a.m. It's required by the manufacturer to maintain my warranty, and it ensures the unit will work when we actually need it during a power outage." I showed him my phone where I had calendar reminders set. "I've been doing it for 8 months now, ever since I had it installed last August." Patricia interjected, her voice shrill. "I don't care what his manual says. This is against HOA rules." Officer Morrison turned to her, and I could see his patience wearing thin. "Madam, what exactly are the HOA rules regarding generators?" She faltered for just a second. "Well, they need to be approved by the Architectural Review Committee." "Is your generator approved?" the officer asked me. I pulled up another folder on my phone. "Yes, sir. I submitted the application in June of last year, got approval in writing in July, had it professionally installed in August by a licensed contractor, and the city issued the permit. I have all the documentation right here." I showed him the email chain with the Architectural Review Committee, where Patricia herself had been one of the 3 members who approved it. Her signature was right there on the digital approval form. Officer Morrison's eyebrows rose as he read through the documentation. "Mrs. Henderson, it says here you approved this installation." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "That was for the installation, not for him to run it whenever he wants." "The application specifically mentions monthly testing requirements," Officer Morrison said, scrolling through the documents on my phone. "It's right here in paragraph 2 of the homeowner's statement." I hadn't expected the officer to be this thorough, but I was grateful. "I included that specifically because I wanted to make sure everything was above board," I explained. "I even highlighted it in the original paper application." Patricia was scrambling now. "The noise ordinance, madam, it's 10 a.m. on a Tuesday." Even the city noise ordinance allows equipment use during these hours. Lawnmowers, leaf blowers, generators, all permitted. Officer Morrison handed my phone back to me. "Mr. Ingram, how much longer on the test?" I checked my watch. "Should shut off automatically in about 90 seconds. Mind if I wait to confirm everything's working properly?" Something about the way he said it made me think he wanted to make absolutely sure Patricia couldn't claim I'd run it for hours after he left. "Not at all, officer. I appreciate you taking the time." We stood there in slightly awkward silence, Patricia fuming, me trying not to smile, and Officer Morrison checking something on his phone with studied casualness. True to form, the generator ran for exactly 15 minutes total, then shut down with a final mechanical sigh. "There we go," I said. "All done until next month, first Tuesday of May." Officer Morrison nodded. "Everything seems to be in order here, Mr. Ingram. You're well within your rights, both according to HOA rules and city ordinances." He turned to Patricia. "Madam, filing false reports wastes police resources. This wasn't an emergency, and it wasn't even a legitimate noise complaint. I'm going to have to ask you to be more judicious about calling 911 in the future." Patricia's face went from red to purple. "False report? I did not file a false report. That thing is clearly a disturbance." "A disturbance would be outside permitted hours or above certain decibel levels. This is neither." Officer Morrison was walking back to his cruiser now, clearly done with the situation. "Have a good day, both of you." As soon as his car pulled away, Patricia rounded on me. "This isn't over, Harold. The board will hear about this, and we will find a way to make you stop disturbing this neighborhood with your ridiculous generator." "Patricia, you approved the generator. You approved the testing schedule. Everything I'm doing is by the book, your book, the city's book, and the manufacturer's book." "What exactly do you think is going to happen?" I was trying to be reasonable, but my patience was wearing thin. "We'll see about that." She stormed off my property, her phone already back in her hand. I went inside, frustrated but not particularly worried. I'd done everything right, had all the documentation, and even the police had confirmed I wasn't doing anything wrong. Surely that would be the end of it. I should have known better. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the Desert Bloom Estates HOA board. Inside was a formal notice of violation claiming I had violated Section 7, Paragraph 12 of the Community Guidelines regarding excessive noise and disruption to neighborhood tranquility. The fine, $500, due within 14 days. I read the letter 3 times, then pulled up the HOA bylaws on my laptop. Section 7, Paragraph 12 did exist, but it was a catch-all clause that basically said the board could deem anything a nuisance if it substantially and unreasonably interferes with other residents' quiet enjoyment of their property. This was exactly the kind of vague language HOAs loved, because it gave them unlimited power to interpret situations however they wanted. But it was also the kind of language that didn't hold up well in court when applied arbitrarily. I called my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She was 73, had lived in the neighborhood for 12 years, and had never been anything but friendly to me since I'd moved in 2 years ago. "Hello, Harold dear," she answered warmly. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Chen? I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to ask, does my generator bother you? When I test it monthly," she laughed. "That little thing, goodness no, I barely notice it. It's quieter than my grandson's video games when he visits. Why do you ask?" I explained the situation, including Patricia's call to the police and the fine I'd just received. Mrs. Chen made a disgusted sound. "That woman. She tried to fine us last year because our mesquite tree's branches hung 1 inch over our property line into the common area. 1 inch. My husband had to get out there with a measuring tape and trimmer to prove we'd fixed it." She paused. "Would it help if I wrote a statement saying your generator doesn't bother me?" "That would actually help a lot, Mrs. Chen. Thank you. I'll do better than that. I'll talk to some of the other neighbors. Patricia has made a lot of enemies on this street. It's about time someone stood up to her." Over the next few days, something remarkable happened. Mrs. Chen worked her magic, and suddenly, I had written statements from 7 different neighbors, all saying they'd never been disturbed by my generator testing and considered it reasonable home maintenance. Mr. Torres, 3 houses down, even mentioned He was thinking about getting his own generator and appreciated seeing mine in operation. Armed with this documentation, plus all my permits and approvals, I drafted a formal response to the HOA board. I disputed the fine, cited my prior approval for the generator and its testing schedule, included the manufacturer's maintenance requirements, referenced the police officer's determination that I was operating within all applicable rules, and attached the neighbor statements. I sent it via certified mail and email to all 5 board members, not just Patricia. The next board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. HOA rules required that any disputed fines be addressed at the next regular meeting, and homeowners had the right to attend and speak. I made sure to clear my schedule. The meeting was held at the Desert Bloom Clubhouse, a stuffy room decorated in the kind of Southwest chic that probably looked dated the day it was installed. About 20 residents were scattered around folding chairs when I arrived. Patricia sat at a long table at the front with 4 other board members. Frank Donnelly, a retired accountant who looked perpetually confused. Margaret Whitmore, a stern woman in her 60s who taught middle school. Robert Chen, Mrs. Chen's son who'd moved into the neighborhood last year. And finally, Susan Mills, a realtor who was usually reasonable. Patricia's eyes locked onto me the second I walked in, and her expression could have curdled milk. "Let's call this meeting to order," Patricia announced, banging a gavel unnecessarily hard. "We have several items on the agenda today, including architectural review requests, upcoming community events, and violations." She droned through the standard business. Someone wanted to repaint their front door a slightly different shade of beige. The neighborhood Easter egg hunt needed volunteers. The community pool needed resurfacing. I waited, my folder of documentation on my lap. Finally, she reached the violation section. "We have one violation dispute this month. Harold Ingram has contested his fine for excessive noise and disruption." "I'd like to address the board," I said, standing up. Patricia looked like she wanted to refuse, but Robert Chen spoke up. "Homeowners have the right to speak regarding contested violations. It's in our bylaws." "Fine." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Keep it brief." I walked to the front and laid out my case methodically. I showed the original architectural review approval with all 5 board members' signatures, including Patricia's. I showed the manufacturer's documentation requiring monthly testing. I showed the city permit. I played a short video I'd taken of the generator running with a decibel meter app showing it peaked at about 75 decibels from my property line, about the same as a vacuum cleaner. Then, I presented the neighbor statements. 7 households have provided written statements that my generator testing has never disturbed them. That's more than a quarter of the homes on my street. I looked at each board member. The violation notice claims I'm substantially and unreasonably interfering with other residents' quiet enjoyment of their property. But I have documented evidence that I'm doing no such thing. Margaret Whitmore spoke up. "Patricia, when you filed this violation, did you have any complaints from other residents besides your own?" Patricia shuffled papers in front of her. The noise was clearly audible across multiple properties. "That's not what I asked. Did you have complaints from other residents?" I received. "Concerns? From whom?" Susan Mills asked, leaning forward. "Because I live 4 houses down from Harold, and I've never heard anything that seemed unreasonable." Patricia's face was reddening again. "As HOA president, I don't need multiple complaints to identify a violation." "That's within my authority." "Actually, it's not," Robert Chen said quietly. He'd pulled out his own copy of the bylaws. "For subjective violations under Section 7, Paragraph 12, The bylaws state that the board should consider the reasonable person standard and the impact on the broader community. One person's complaint, especially when 7 households have stated there's no problem, doesn't meet that standard. Frank Donnelly, who'd been silent up until now, cleared his throat. I have to say, I'm looking at this approval from last year, and Harold did everything by the book. He disclosed the testing requirement in writing. We all approved it. I don't see how we can fine him for doing exactly what he said he would do in an application we approved. The approval was for installation, not operation, Patricia insisted, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. The application specifically mentions monthly testing. It's highlighted right here. Susan Mills was looking at her copy of the documents I'd submitted. Patricia, I'm not comfortable upholding this fine. Harold has done everything right. I agree, Margaret said. This seems personal rather than procedural. Patricia stood up abruptly. This is exactly the problem with this board. You're all too soft. Rules mean nothing if we don't enforce standards of behavior. This neighborhood is going downhill because people like Harold think they can do whatever they want. Patricia, sit down. Robert Chen's voice was firm. Harold isn't doing whatever he wants. He's following our rules, the city's rules, and the manufacturer's requirements. That's the opposite of doing whatever he wants. The room had gone silent. The other residents were watching with rapt attention. This was clearly more drama than the usual board meeting provided. Patricia sat down stiffly, her lips pressed into a thin line. I move to dismiss the violation and fine against Harold Ingram, Susan Mills said. I second, Margaret Whitmore added. All in favor? Robert Chen asked. 3 hands went up immediately: Susan, Margaret, and Robert. Frank Donnelly looked between them and Patricia, clearly uncomfortable with the conflict, then slowly raised his hand as well. Motion passes 4-1, Robert announced. The violation is dismissed and no fine will be assessed. Patricia grabbed her papers and shoved them into her bag. This meeting is adjourned. She didn't even bother with the gavel, just stormed out of the clubhouse. Several residents came up to me afterward, congratulating me or sharing their own Patricia horror stories. Mrs. Chen was there too, beaming with pride like I'd won a Nobel Prize instead of just successfully defending my right to maintain my own property. But as I drove home that night, I had a nagging feeling this wasn't over. I'd won the battle, but Patricia wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. She'd been publicly embarrassed in front of the board and the residents, and people like her didn't forget that kind of thing. Sure enough, the first Tuesday in May rolled around, and when 10 a.m. hit, I started my generator test as scheduled. I was in my backyard, enjoying the pleasant morning weather when I heard sirens. Not again. This time, 2 police cruisers pulled up. 4 officers got out and I felt my stomach drop. This was a much more serious response than last time. Officer Morrison was one of them, and he looked distinctly unhappy to be there. Mr. Ingram. Officer Morrison, let me guess, Patricia called again. She called and claimed you were running an industrial generator in violation of a court order prohibiting you from doing so. He looked at me carefully. Is there a court order I should know about? No, sir. There's absolutely no court order. The HOA board dismissed the violation against me at their meeting last week. I have the meeting minutes if you need them. Officer Morrison's jaw tightened. Show me. I pulled them up on my phone. He read them, his expression growing darker. He showed them to the other officers, then walked back to his cruiser. I could see him on his radio, having what looked like an intense conversation. When he came back, he was all business. Mr. Ingram, we're going to need to file a report about this. Mrs. Henderson has now called 911 twice in 3 weeks with false or exaggerated claims regarding your generator. That's a pattern of abuse of emergency services. I don't want to cause trouble, I started, but he cut me off. Sir, with respect, she's causing the trouble. We have limited resources and we need them available for actual emergencies. When someone repeatedly files false reports, that's a crime. It's called false reporting, and in Arizona, it's a Class 1 misdemeanor. I hadn't expected this. What does that mean? It means we're going to have a conversation with Mrs. Henderson about the appropriate use of 911 services. If she continues this behavior, she could face charges. He handed me a case number on a card. Keep this. Document every generator test you do, time, duration, any incidents. If she calls again, we'll need that information. After the officers left, two of them heading directly to Patricia's house, I noted I sat down on my back patio and tried to process what was happening. This had escalated so far beyond what I'd ever imagined. All I'd wanted was to maintain my generator according to the manufacturer's specifications. Instead, I was now involved in police reports and potential criminal charges against my HOA president. My phone rang. It was Robert Chen. Harold, I just heard Patricia called the cops on you again. Are you okay? I'm fine. The police were actually really professional about it. They're filing a report about false reporting. Robert sighed heavily. Listen, I need to tell you something. Patricia has been calling an emergency board meeting. She's demanding we revoke your generator approval and implement new rules about generator operation. Can she do that? She can call the meeting, but she needs 3 votes to pass anything. After last week, I don't think she has them. He paused. But I wanted to warn you, she's also threatening to sue you personally for harassment. Harassment? I've been doing nothing but following the rules, I know, and any lawyer would laugh her out of their office, but she's grasping at straws, she's embarrassed, and she's lashing out. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for that Friday evening. Once again, I cleared my schedule to attend. This time, the clubhouse was packed. Word had spread through the neighborhood that there was drama, and people loved drama. Patricia sat at the front table, her expression carved from stone. Susan Mills looked exhausted, Margaret Whitmore looked annoyed, Frank Donnelly looked scared, and Robert Chen looked ready for a fight. This emergency meeting has been called to address an ongoing situation threatening the safety and well-being of our community. Patricia began without preamble. Harold Ingram's continued operation of industrial equipment. It's not industrial equipment, Susan interrupted. We've been over this. Continues to create a hostile environment. I'm proposing an immediate amendment to our bylaws, Section 7, to specifically prohibit the operation of generators except during actual power outages. The room erupted. About half the residents started talking at once. I noticed several of them were looking at me sympathetically, while others seemed to support Patricia. Robert Chen banged the gavel. One at a time, please. Harold, you're the affected party. You want to speak first. I stood up. Patricia, if you implement this rule, you'll invalidate the warranties of every home generator in this neighborhood. And yes, there are others. I'm not the only one. I'd done my homework after the last meeting. The Rodriguezes on Cactus Drive have one, the Patels on Desert Willow. The Hoffmans on Saguaro Vista just had one installed last month. Are you planning to fine all of us? Patricia's eyes flickered with uncertainty. She hadn't known there were other generators. Mr. Hoffman stood up. I got my generator because of Harold's recommendation. My wife has medical equipment that needs power. If you're telling me I can't maintain my generator, you're putting my wife's health at risk. That changed the energy in the room immediately. Several people started talking about the power outages last summer, the aging electrical grid, the importance of being prepared. Margaret Whitmore held up her hand. Patricia, I'm not supporting this proposed amendment. We approved these generators. The homeowners have done everything right. This is government overreach, HOA style. I agree, Susan said. This is ridiculous. We have actual issues to deal with. The pool resurfacing is behind schedule. We still haven't fixed the irrigation system in the common areas, and 3 streetlights are out on Mesquite Drive. Why are we wasting time on this? Patricia's face was doing that red to purple thing again. Because standards matter. Because when we let people do whatever they want, the whole community suffers. What's suffering? Robert Chen asked pointedly. Show me one person besides yourself who has actually suffered because of Harold's generator tests. Just one. Silence. That's what I thought. Robert stood up. Patricia, I think it's time we discussed whether you're fit to continue as HOA president. This vendetta has wasted board time, wasted police resources, and created division in a community that was getting along just fine. I'm formally calling for a vote of no confidence. The room went dead silent. A vote of no confidence was the nuclear option in HOA politics. If it passed, Patricia would be removed as president immediately. Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. You can't do that. Actually, I can. It's in our bylaws, Section 12, Paragraph 8. Any board member can call for a vote of no confidence with cause. I'd say false police reports and abuse of power qualify as cause. Robert looked at the other board members. Do I have a second? Seconded, Margaret said immediately. Third, Susan added. Frank Donnelly looked like he wanted to sink through the floor, but he nodded. I also support it. I'm sorry, Patricia, but this has gone too far. Patricia stood up, trembling with rage. You're all making a huge mistake. This neighborhood needs someone with backbone, someone who won't let standards slip. You'll regret this. The bylaws require a vote at the next regular board meeting, Robert said calmly. That's in 3 weeks. In the meantime, Patricia, I strongly suggest you step back from this situation with Harold's generator. Patricia grabbed her bag and left without another word. The meeting dissolved into chaos as residents began talking among themselves. Several people came up to me, apologizing for what I'd been through, expressing support. Mrs. Chen patted my arm. You did good, Harold. Someone needed to stand up to her. I just felt tired. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to maintain my generator. I know, dear, but sometimes doing the right thing means fighting battles you didn't choose. Over the next 3 weeks, the neighborhood was tense. Patricia stopped attending board meetings, sending emails instead. She filed formal complaints against Robert Chen, accusing him of conspiracy and harassment. She sent a mass email to all residents warning them about the dangerous precedent of removing an elected HOA president. But she also did something that caught me completely off guard. She hired a lawyer. I got served with papers on a Wednesday afternoon. Patricia Henderson v. Harold Ingram. She was suing me for intentional infliction of emotional distress, harassment, and creating a private nuisance. She was seeking $20,000 in damages. I sat at my kitchen table, reading the complaint in disbelief. According to her lawyer's flowery language, my persistent and intentional operation of industrial machinery, despite repeated complaints, had caused Patricia severe emotional distress, sleep disruption, anxiety, and damage to her quality of life. It was complete nonsense, but it was also a lawsuit. I needed my own lawyer. I called a few attorneys, explained the situation, and got referred to Thomas Garcia, a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in downtown Scottsdale, and he agreed to see me the next day. Thomas was about 50, with graying hair and the kind of relaxed confidence that comes from having seen everything. He read through Patricia's complaint while I gave him the full story, showed him all my documentation, and explained the history. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, then he started laughing. "I'm sorry," he said, seeing my expression. "I shouldn't laugh, but this is one of the most frivolous lawsuits I've seen in my 15 years of practice. She has no case, none whatsoever. Then why is she doing this? Harassment, most likely. She's trying to intimidate you into backing down, or at least make the situation expensive enough that you give up." He flipped through the documents. "But she's made some serious mistakes here. First, she's claiming intentional infliction of emotional distress. That's an incredibly high bar in Arizona. You basically have to engage in behavior that's extreme and outrageous beyond all bounds of decency. Testing your generator according to manufacturer specifications. Not even close. What about the harassment claim? Again, no basis. Harassment requires a pattern of behavior intended to annoy, alarm, or harass. You've been doing routine maintenance on your property. That's not harassment," he smiled. "Plus, you've got documentation of everything. The approvals, the police reports showing she filed false complaints, the neighbor statements, the board meeting minutes. This is a defense lawyer's dream. So what do? We file a motion to dismiss, which should be granted, and then if you're interested, we consider a countersuit." He leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Ingram, Patricia has defamed you, filed false police reports, abused her position as HOA president, and is now filing a frivolous lawsuit. You have grounds for a malicious prosecution claim, abuse of process, and possibly even civil rights violations under Arizona's HOA statutes. I hadn't considered going on the offensive. I don't know. I just want this to be over. I understand. But people like Patricia don't stop until someone makes them stop. She's counting on you being too tired, too intimidated, or too broke to fight back. If you let her win through attrition, she'll do this to someone else next month." He spread his hands. "Think about it. No pressure. But my professional opinion, you not only have the right to defend yourself, you have the right to hold her accountable." I left his office with a lot to think about. That weekend, I ran into Mr. Hoffman at the grocery store. He pulled me aside in the produce section. "Harold, I heard Patricia sued you. That's insane." "Yeah, my lawyer says it won't go anywhere, but it's still stressful." He nodded sympathetically. "Listen, if you need anything, character witnesses or whatever, let me know. Patricia tried to fine us last month for having our garbage cans visible from the street. They were visible for maybe 20 minutes on trash day while we were loading them. She's out of control." "I appreciate that. Really." "No, I mean it. A bunch of us have been talking. Patricia has been terrorizing this neighborhood for years, and everyone's too afraid to push back because she'll make your life hell. But you pushed back, and now she's showing her true colors. We want to support you." Monday morning, my first Tuesday in June, I tested my generator right on schedule. I half expected Patricia to call the police again, but nothing happened. Officer Morrison did drive by slowly about halfway through the test, saw me wave, and drove on. I appreciated that he was keeping an eye on things. The regular board meeting was that Tuesday evening, the one where they'd vote on Patricia's removal. I got there early and found the parking lot already packed. This was going to be a spectacle. Inside, the clubhouse was standing room only. Someone had even brought popcorn. Patricia sat at the front table, looking isolated. The other 4 board members were grouped together, clearly a unified front against her. Robert Chen called the meeting to order. "We have a vote of no confidence scheduled for tonight regarding Patricia Henderson's continued service as HOA president. Patricia, you have the right to speak on your own behalf before the vote." Patricia stood, and I could see her hands shaking. I've served this community faithfully for 3 years. I've enforced our rules, maintained our standards, and protected our property values. Now, because I dared to stand up to someone who thinks rules don't apply to him, I'm being removed. This is a witch hunt, plain and simple." She sat down to scattered, awkward applause from maybe 3 people. "Does anyone else wish to speak?" Robert asked. To my surprise, Mrs. Chen stood up. "I've lived in Desert Bloom for 12 years. I've seen 3 different HOA presidents. Patricia has been the worst by far. She uses the rules as weapons, not guidelines. She plays favorites, targets people she doesn't like, and has created an atmosphere of fear rather than community. I fully support her removal." Several other residents spoke, most echoing Mrs. Chen's sentiments. A few defended Patricia, mostly pointing to specific rule enforcement they'd appreciated, but even they seemed uncomfortable with how the generator situation had been handled. Finally, Robert called for the vote. "All board members in favor of removing Patricia Henderson as HOA president, raise your hands." 4 hands went up. Only Patricia's stayed down. The motion passes 4-1. "Patricia, you're removed as president effective immediately. You'll remain on the board as a regular member until your term expires next year, unless you choose to resign." Patricia gathered her things mechanically, her face blank. She walked out without saying a word. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Susan Mills was elected the new president by unanimous vote of the remaining 4 members. Her first act was to formally apologize to me for the board's handling of the situation, but the lawsuit was still pending. 2 weeks later, Thomas filed our motion to dismiss, along with a strongly worded response that laid out just how baseless Patricia's claims were. We had a hearing scheduled for August. In the meantime, life went on. I tested my generator on the first Tuesday of July without incident. The neighborhood pool finally got resurfaced. Someone organized a 4th of July barbecue at the clubhouse, and the atmosphere was noticeably more relaxed without Patricia looming over everything. The hearing in August was anticlimactic. Patricia's lawyer, who I suspected had realized he'd taken on a terrible case, made a half-hearted argument. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Judge Martinez, read through the case file with increasing disbelief. "Counselor," she said to Patricia's attorney, "your client filed false police reports against the defendant. That's documented by the Scottsdale Police Department. She attempted to fine him for behavior she had previously approved in writing. She called an emergency HOA meeting to target him specifically, and now she's claiming he's harassing her. Your Honor, my client has been under considerable stress. I'm sure she has. Mostly self-inflicted from what I can see." Judge Martinez turned to Thomas. "Mr. Garcia, your motion to dismiss is granted. All of Mrs. Henderson's claims are dismissed with prejudice. She cannot refile these specific claims." Patricia, sitting next to her lawyer, looked like she'd been turned to stone. "Furthermore," Judge Martinez continued, "I'm awarding attorney's fees to the defendant. Mrs. Henderson, you will be responsible for Mr. Ingram's legal costs in defending this frivolous lawsuit." Thomas leaned over to me. "That's about $12,000, by the way." The judge wasn't done. "Mrs. Henderson, you've wasted this court's time with a lawsuit that had no merit from day one. You've abused your position in your HOA, filed false police reports, and attempted to use the legal system as a weapon against someone who was simply maintaining their property. I strongly suggest you reflect on your behavior before you consider any future litigation." After the hearing, Thomas and I stood outside the courthouse. "So that's it?" I asked. "That's it for her lawsuit. Now we talk about whether you want to pursue your own claims." He pulled out a folder. I've drafted a complaint for malicious prosecution, abuse of process, and a few other torts. My estimate is we could probably get $30,000 to $40,000 if we go to trial, maybe settle for 20. I thought about it, watching the Phoenix traffic crawl by in the August heat. Will it stop her from doing this to someone else? It might. Financial consequences are often the only thing that gets through to people like her. Then let's do it. But I want to be clear, I don't care about the money. Whatever we win, I'm donating to a charity that helps homeowners fight abusive HOAs. This is about accountability. Thomas smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. We filed the countersuit in September. Patricia tried to get it dismissed, but unlike her case against me, ours had merit. We had documented damages, clear evidence of malicious behavior, and the judge's previous statements about her conduct on the record. The case proceeded through discovery, where we got to see Patricia's emails and communications about me. They were damning. She'd called me that arrogant generator jerk in an email to another HOA member. She discussed finding a way to force him out of the neighborhood. She'd even researched whether she could place a lien on my house for unpaid fines, despite the board having dismissed those fines. Thomas built a devastating case. Patricia's own words convicted her. By December, her lawyer was begging for a settlement. Thomas negotiated hard. In the end, Patricia agreed to pay $25,000, issue a formal written apology to me and the HOA board, and resign from the HOA board entirely. She also agreed never to seek HOA leadership in Desert Bloom Estates again. The apology letter arrived 2 days before Christmas. It was clearly written by her lawyer, full of formal language about regrettable misunderstandings and heat-of-the-moment reactions. But it was signed by Patricia, and it acknowledged that I had done nothing wrong. I donated the $25,000 to a nonprofit called Homeowners Against HOA Abuse, based out of Nevada but operating across the Southwest. They helped homeowners navigate HOA disputes, provided legal resources, and advocated for HOA reform legislation. The following January, I got a letter from them thanking me for the donation. They'd used part of it to help a family in Mesa fight an HOA that was trying to force them to remove a wheelchair ramp because it wasn't aesthetically consistent with neighborhood standards. They won. On the first Tuesday in February, I ran my generator test at 10 a.m., just like always. Mrs. Chen was working in her garden next door, and she waved to me. Mr. Hoffman drove by on his way to work and honked his horn. It was peaceful, normal, boring in the best possible way. That evening, Susan Mills called me. "Harold, I wanted to let you know Patricia put her house on the market. She's moving to Tucson." Really? I think after everything, she just couldn't handle staying in the neighborhood. Too much embarrassment. Susan paused. "I also wanted to thank you. I know this whole situation was horrible for you, but it exposed a lot of problems with how the HOA was being run. The new board has implemented a bunch of reforms. We're requiring majority board votes for any fines over $100. We've established an appeals process for violations, and we're reviewing all the subjective bylaws to make them more specific and fair." "That's great, Susan. Really. It wouldn't have happened if you hadn't stood your ground, so thank you." After we hung up, I sat on my back patio with a beer, looking at my generator. It sat there quietly on its concrete pad, a perfectly ordinary piece of equipment that had somehow become the center of a months-long war. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Robert Chen with a photo attached. It showed his mother, Mrs. Chen, holding a clipboard and grinning. The caption read, "Mom got elected to the HOA board tonight. God help us all." I laughed out loud. Mrs. Chen on the board was exactly what Desert Bloom Estates needed. Someone with common sense, kindness, and the backbone to stand up to busybodies who confused HOA leadership with feudal lordship. I thought about everything that had happened over the past 10 months. The police calls, the fines, the board meetings, the lawsuit, all of it. It had been exhausting and stressful and expensive, even with the settlement money covering my legal fees. There had been moments I'd considered just giving up, letting Patricia win, maybe even selling my house and moving somewhere without an HOA. But I hadn't. And in the end, that made all the difference. Not just for me, but for the whole neighborhood. Sometimes standing up for something as simple as your right to maintain your own property becomes about something larger. It becomes about whether rules are applied fairly, whether power can be checked, whether ordinary people can hold their ground against petty tyrants. The generator hummed to life on the first Tuesday of March, right on schedule. 15 minutes of routine maintenance. That's all it had ever been. That's all it would ever be. But now it represented something more to me, a reminder that doing the right thing is worth fighting for, even when the fight is harder and longer than it should be. Patricia's house sold in April to a young couple with a toddler. They introduced themselves to the neighborhood at a weekend barbecue. The husband mentioned they were thinking about getting a generator after some power outages at their last place. I gave him the name of my installer and a copy of the HOA application form. "Fair warning," I said, handing him my contact information. "There's a monthly testing requirement. But the new HOA board is reasonable about it." "Good to know. Thanks, Harold." That night, I updated my calendar for the next generator test. First Tuesday of May, 10 a.m. Same as always. The difference was that now, instead of anxiety about what Patricia might do, I felt only calm. My property was my own. My responsibilities were clear. And my neighborhood was finally becoming the kind of community it should have been all along. Mrs. Chen hosted a garden party that weekend. Nearly 40 residents showed up, including the new HOA board in full force. Susan Mills made a speech about community values and working together. No one mentioned Patricia, though her empty house loomed on the corner like a reminder of what happens when power goes to someone's head. "To new beginnings," Mrs. Chen toasted, raising her glass of lemonade. "To standing your ground," Mr. Hoffman added, raising his glass in my direction. "To generators," I said, and everyone laughed. The desert sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple as we stood there in Mrs. Chen's backyard, neighbors who'd become allies, a community that had found its backbone. My generator sat silent on its pad next door, waiting for the first Tuesday of the next month when it would hum to life for exactly 15 minutes, doing exactly what it was designed to do. It turned out that was all it ever needed to do. Everything else, the drama and lawsuits and police calls, that had all been about people, not machines. About power and control and someone who couldn't accept that rules applied to everyone equally, including her. I went home that night feeling genuinely content for the first time since this whole mess had started nearly a year ago. My house was mine. My generator was permitted and approved. My neighborhood was at peace. And somewhere in Tucson, Patricia was learning that being an HOA president didn't make you a dictator. On the first Tuesday in June, exactly 1 year after Patricia had first called the cops on my generator test, I stood in my backyard and pressed the test button at 10 a.m. The familiar hum filled the air. Mrs. Chen waved from her garden. A few houses down, I could see Mr. Hoffman's new generator, installed last month, sitting on its own concrete pad. Officer Morrison drove by on patrol, slowed down, saw me testing my generator and gave me a thumbs up through his window. I returned it. 15 minutes later, the generator shut down automatically. Another successful test. Another month of warranty protection. Another small victory for doing things the right way, even when people tried to make it impossible. I pulled out my phone and made a note in my calendar. First Tuesday of July, 10 a.m., generator test. Then I went inside, poured myself a coffee, and got back to living my life. No drama, no lawsuits, no HOA presidents losing their minds over routine maintenance. Just a man, his house, his generator, and a community that had finally learned the difference between leadership and tyranny. It had taken longer than it should have, cost more than it should have, and caused more stress than it should have. But we'd gotten there in the end, and that was enough.